This is the GMS Magazine podcast, and I am Paco Garcia, your host. This is a podcast all about role playing games and board games and the people who make them, sometimes the people who play them as well. This is the RPG interview room, the room in which I am lucky enough to get together with some of the best people in the world of role playing games and ask them a ton of questions about their dreams, their projects, what they're doing, what they're going to do, so on and so forth. And today, I have with me Giles Penworth. Giles is the person behind Vynestra. I had absolutely no idea what Vynestra was. And to be perfectly honest, usually I stay away from kind of semi medieval 5e settings because there are so many of them. I'm looking for something different, something unique. But Giles came under the recommendation of my friend Evangelos Foskolos. I've known Evangelos for a very long time, since we met at Spiel years and years ago, and I've reviewed and unboxed a few of his board games. And he knows his mustard. He would not put his name behind something that wasn't worth paying attention to. So I said, okay, let's look at this. Let's find out what Giles and Vynestra have to offer, and let's do this interview. Before we dive into it, though, the usual reminder, please, if you want to be featured in the show, if you want to come to have a chat with us, even if you don't have any product, even if you just want to have a chat about a particular topic or a subject or something, a conversation that you would like to have about anything, please do let us know. Both myself and Chris will be delighted to have you around. So, by all means, we want you here with us. This podcast is nothing without our audience, and that is you. And please subscribe to our channels. I know I keep saying this, but it really means a lot. The algorithm is what it wants. So please, that helps. Giving a like, retweeting, talking about us, that help us being out there. And it means, trust me, as somebody who's been doing this for nearly 13 years now, it means the world. So please say hello. It would be absolutely fantastic. And email me podcast@gmsmagazine.com, which I check twice, maybe three times a week. So please say hello. I'm not going to say any more because I've said enough. So here is Giles. Giles, welcome to the show. This has been probably one of the quickest arranged interviews that I have done over the last, I don't know how many weeks, because usually it takes me about a month, 3 weeks to a month to do something. But you came recommended by Evangelos Vaskalas, and I just had to pay attention to him because he's a very good guy and very talented. So he knows his mustard. So welcome to the show, sir. How are you doing?
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm doing really well. It has been a chaotic week for me the past week because we've obviously had the Kickstarter launch on Tuesday. It's also been my partner's 30th birthday on the Friday, and we had a big party on the Saturday and the Sunday. So I've been preparing almost like two major events over the past 2 weeks, and yeah, I'm now able to sit and relax a little bit before we go abroad next week. So
I don't think I know anyone who didn't have a busy, chaotic, hectic week last week.
yep,
I don't know what kind of weird astral combination is going on at the moment. That life is just mental. And
there's
you're
something in
going,
the
yeah, definitely, or the water, something like that. Are you going to Essen next week by any chance?
I am not. I unfortunately I'm going to Venice, which if you look at the Kickstarter, you'll know why probably. But yeah, it's my favorite city in the world, and it's a celebration for the Kickstarter releasing
Okay.
and everything. We're heading abroad to Venice for a few weeks.
Okay, fair enough. So let's unveil the mystery for the humans. Although I will have already told them something in the intro, but you're going to do a Kickstarter for a game called Vynestra. Is that how you pronounce it? Am I pronouncing it correctly?
You got it right. You got it in one.
Good, good, good. And when you sent me the link to the review material, I just thought, oh shit, I'm not gonna read 5 books for next week. It's just not gonna happen,
Yep.
dude. 5 books. That's a lot of game. Why 5 books?
So it's a story. So it started off as one book. Well, it started off as less than a book even. So I run a D&D 5e game for my home players, and I got to a point where I kind of burnt out a bit with our home campaign, and then I say to my players, "Hey, would you folks be interested in running your own sessions in my little setting?" And they were like, "Yeah, we'd love to," because a couple of them are GMs and they wanted to like run stuff. So like, what I'll do for you, I'll write you a little 50-page, small little like document that will give the setting and the city and everything for you to run your own D&D games in. And 4 years later, that turned into 5 books that are somehow going on to Kickstarter. Yeah, it was a wild journey of kind of thinking, oh, this could, like, I need this bit to explain this bit, so then I'm going to add this bit on. I need this bit to explain this bit, so I'm going to add this bit on. And I was like, okay, well, since I'm doing all that, let's just start at the top and then work our way back down again, and then work all the way back up to make sure it all makes sense. And then it was going to be one book that was 1,000 pages long, and they were like, the binding's not going to hold out on that thing. And
Dude,
also,
the arms are not gonna hold down to that thing. I mean, that would be like the weight of a small pig.
yes, it's just like I only have one tabletop book like that, which is the Apollo tabletop game that just is mostly Apollo technical manuals, and it is this thick. You could just bludgeon someone with it. It's so heavy. Yeah, so I say I don't want that. I want, as a GM, to have books I can reference and easily flip through and have references in. So that was my why it got split into 5 out of instead of just one. Yeah.
Okay, which is very, very fair enough. Okay, tell me about Vynestra. What is the world like, and what is it all about?
So Vynestra is very much your classical like D&D high fantasy world, but we've very much had a focus on true, authentic ancient cultures. So very much doing a lot of research into, for example, my main area of interest is Rome. So I studied the Roman Republic for 2 years, and I absolutely love the culture of the Roman Republic. So that was obviously the focus of a couple of the books, was to really deep dive into this more so than I've seen a lot of other tabletop games sort of do, but also then to take that and meld it with a very high fantasy setting. So it's what I see a couple of people coming to the Kickstarter expecting is it just to be Rome, and it's not that. It's if you took Roman Republican culture and then melded it into high fantasy and took it through the timeline of a high fantasy world, how that would have changed and how that culture would have adapted over time to become what it is. And the rest of the universe is very much based around that sort of concept as well. We have like Parthians and Scythians and Persian equivalents, and how their cultures will have adapted to this kind of high fantasy setting as well. So in a nutshell, classical cultures in a high fantasy world.
Are you going beyond European cultures, in beyond Rome? What cultures are you going to be referencing and reflecting within the game?
So we have a lot of obviously like European centric, so Greece and Rome. We've also got sort of a few of the cultures that we've seen a war with those cultures as well. So like Persia, Scythia, Parthia. I'm less familiar with a lot of things outside of the European centric, because that was my main area of study, was that sort of classical era. But I have been started reading a bit more around other cultures around the world, and I really want to start incorporating them into it. And there have been loose mentions in the books already. Also, there's a very cute dog behind you.
Yeah, that's Tycho, who usually makes an appearance from time to time and just looks cute. But he decides for some annoying reason to be immediately behind me, where if he was sitting on the other corner, then he would look absolutely gorgeous. But yeah, he has to be there. Sorry about that. He lives here.
Bless him. But yes, it's something I'm looking into researching more, and like because of how I research things, I want to do those cultures justice. I don't want to take stereotypes. So if I was going to look into anything outside of my familiarity, I'd want to get proper consultants in, get proper like historians and professors that I can talk to like really make sure I'm doing that justice. Yeah,
that's fair enough indeed. What kind of history has built the world. And let me explain a little bit what I mean with this. It happens very often when people devise their world, but I am left reading the book. I'm thinking, but what am I meant to do here?
Mm.
What makes it different to create a character in Vynestra than it would anywhere else? Because if it's just a matter of, well, you just have a centurion, for instance, I don't know, or something like that, and you just go out and adventuring. Then I kept thinking, well, why would I need to read a new book to do that? So what makes Vynestra interesting and different for the player?
Sure. So one thing I really wanted to focus on was the idea of legacy. And also I'm very much around the concept of a lot of GMs homebrew, and that's something that's actively encouraged in a lot of tabletop games, and even if it isn't encouraged, people will do it anyway. So I very much built Vynestra with the mindset of, once you have that book, it is not my universe, as Giles Penfold, it's not my universe anymore. It is yours to do with what you want. Change it, modify it, make it your own. And that idea, going back to the idea of legacy, it's having it so that when a player plays through that world, and in Vynestra, it's got a very a theme around the players becoming demigods. That's kind of what their path generally is. So they ascend to these mythical heights or demigoddom, and eventually potentially even ascend as actual gods. And then that becomes legacy to your Vynestra at your table. So when you run future sessions, those players' histories and legacies and lore are kept within the world, and the world has adapted and changed to suit that and accommodate that. One thing that a lot of people are worried about is, like, because we have a lot of high fantasy areas and some people want a more traditional classical world as well, I've tried to build in a lot of rule sets where you can almost like puzzle piece remove things and slot other things in. So if you want this high fantasy thing, you can keep that, or you can replace it with a classical thing. So there's a lot of adaptability, and that's kind of where I think Vynestra really sits, is its adaptability and also this idea of legacy to it as well.
Okay, and I can imagine as well that means that there is an awful lot of scope for expansion in the future. If you wanted to, I don't know, include the Gauls or the Saxons or whoever, you would be able to include them quite easily, which is quite nice. World. Tell me about Vynestra, because the few paragraphs I read, a world created by the threads of fate.
Yeah,
that are collapsing right now. What is that?
So yeah, this is a quite a long story, I guess, but I'll try and keep it short.
Okay.
I love the concept of fate being a literal being. Like fate is like the great mover from like philosophy. It's this unknowing entity that has just created life, and it just sits there threading these threads, and these threads are known as soul threads, and these become the souls of people, and everyone has their own bundle of soul threads that creates their soul and a living person. And as you live your life, these soul threads eventually wither and fray and become inert as you follow your path, before you end up with the one soul thread left in which you finally die, because that is the thread that you have led your life through. And then the threads are frayed, fate again gathers them and then reweaves them into a new soul. And there's this idea of sort of cycling soul threads, and it's where a lot of the demigod stuff comes from. There's a lot of lore in there. I won't go into the depths of it because we'll be here for hours, but there was one instance where a lot of the gods their souls were destroyed to some degree and scattered, and then they got woven into the soul threads of the mortals, and these have been passed down through bloodlines. So some people have deific soul threads woven into their souls, and that is where these kind of like demigod-like abilities come from people. They can derive little abilities from the gods that soul threads happen to be woven into them. So when it says the sort of the threads of fate, that's where it all began, with just fate spinning a thread, essentially.
And now those threads are collapsing around the world. Is there some sort of apocalypse going on?
The sort of is. So in the central plane called the medial plane, there's been a rebirth already. One of the primordials died. That destroyed a lot of things, drove a lot of people underground as the Earth Elemental sacrificed himself to protect everyone underground, and people are now emerging after several thousand years, but they're all the sons and daughters of the primordials, of these like old gods that have come back up to the surface, and they've tried to revitalize in like it's almost like a Renaissance era of, you know, what we remembered to be back then, and they've given their soul threads to power this world, but they only have a finite source of this, and it's again they're starting to dwindle, and the void, which is the area that is outside of what fate has constructed, is slowly starting to encroach back in as darkness is starting to seep in through the edges, and it's kind of we the universe in this teetering point where you're not really sure. Like there are people who are like, yes, Theos, the god of light and divine, is still alive and very much trying to keep things there, and there's other people like Theos is dead, the light is fading, you know, we're fading, we need to do something about this now. And it's all hinging on waiting for Kandor, who is one of the primordials, to return. He went out into the void and has been gone for thousands of years, and it's probably why everything went into imbalance was because and waiting for him to come back, so that balance will be restored. So that's a big thing that we're planning for potentially one of the campaigns.
Okay, that makes it sound a lot more interesting. What kind of characters can people create within Vynestra?
So we have all the style sort of races, or kinships as we call them in Vynestra. So you have all like dwarves, elves, and all that kind of stuff. We have a few that we have sort of taken inspiration from Pathfinder. So we have sort of cat folk, goblins, and orcs as well. And a few interesting ones I really love. The Ashenborn, are very fun. So the primordial that died and set everything into imbalance had phoenixes under their command, and phoenixes were a good entity, but when that went out of balance, the phoenixes turned and became evil. So you might see some art of some people fighting off against phoenixes. Canonically in Vynestra are an evil creature because they have been driven to the depths of insanity from their prime going and withering. The soul threads of these phoenixes that eventually scattered across the medial plane went into some elves, and they eventually became the magma-born Ashenswan, who are these magmatic elves that have been born from the lingering souls of phoenixes. And my favorite bit of lore about them is that when they die, they turn like a phoenix into ash, and then they can be reborn from the ash. So you can have multiple generations of the same person, essentially. So that's one of the cool races that you can play.
That sounds okay. I like the sound of evil phoenixes, I have to say, and the idea that creatures may have been turning into evil because of that. Is that because of the the imbalance in all the threats of fate? Is that also affecting sentient species? So you can have some that used to be good and now they're turning evil, or vice versa, because the opposite could also be true.
Also, I don't inherently subscribe to we're not breaking up. Okay, cool.
Yeah, we're sorry about that, humans. We were having some technical difficulties, finally being sorted.
But it's a bit wonky at times. Like certain races or kinships could be evil. That's not something I wanted in Vynestra. When I say like phoenixes and evil, it's more of that they just rampantly attack things, but they're not inherently like evil creatures. They just rampage. Okay. So yeah, with like sentient people, there is this whole concept around balance. Fate dictates balance, and there are gods who sit on either side of it. There are gods who incite chaos, and there are gods who incite a more balanced way of life, and they're always trying to fight against each other to keep this balance of the universe, so that things just don't flip over entirely and become destroyed. So with like the sentient groups of people, they also have the cultists of these gods who are then enacting their whims. So you have people like Kylera, who is all about rampant growth, and like her followers will be just inciting reincarnation and rampant growth of these soul threads. Whereas Kistra is the goddess of death and on life, and this balance of that fate is trying to keep going and is very much locked in loggerheads against each other. They very much against what each other believe. So yeah, there's a lot of conflict in that sort of religious sense.
Okay, so I'm creating a character. Um, what kind of character can I create? Are there going to be professions, classes? How does that work?
So it's all the traditional 5e classes, since it is a 5e sort of like setting. And we've got 6 subclasses that you can choose from that are themed around the Aldaran Empire, which is our Rome-inspired group. So we have Legionaries, so you can become a sort of strategic fighter on the battlefield and make formations with your allies. And if you keep in formation, you get really good bonuses. So you can like protect people or try and make a wedge to drive through enemy lines. One of my personal favorites is the Griffin Rider. You can the Aldarans sort of very much use griffins as part of their military. They have aerial legions, and you get a small little fledgling griffin that you raise and train up, and it grows alongside you as you level up and becomes stronger, and you sort of like bond with it and can start soaring the skies. And that's another sort of fighter subclass that I really like. And then we've got a couple of sort of cleric domains. We've got emotion, where you can manipulate the emotions of people around you. We have the revelry domain, because the Romans loved wine, so I was like, I just want to make something around wine. That sounds pretty fun. So you can infuse spells into alcohol and then throw it to your allies, and then they can drink it, cast a spell, and then become magically drunk, which gives you various buffs and debuffs for doing that. There's the College of the Five Bard, which is a bardic college that you can join. It has the 5 instruments of the Aldaran Empire, which is going to test my knowledge of my own setting, if I can remember all 5. Timpani, the lyre, the cornu, the flute, and the one other starts with a T. I can't remember the name of. 5 instruments, and you can summon each of them magically. And when you play them, they each do different effects. And you can start a little balance party with your allies and scare off people and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, those are sort of like the unique little subclasses that we've made. And then finally there's the warlock patron, the twin moons. So they're the 2 moons, and you pick which moon to make a pact with, and it mimics lycanthropy. So you can change into this sort of astral lichen at points, and can even summon spectral wolves to your side to help fight. Very fun thematical little things.
Okay. How, if at all, have you adapted the 5e system to Vynestra? Did it require any kind of modification to fit the world and make it more idiosyncratic?
There are a couple of areas I modified. So I think my major gripe that I have with 5e, especially at low levels, is the action economy, especially for martial types. So when I was earlier talking about demigods, that stems from what's known as the ember system. And the ember system is it's almost like a separate progression track that you have. So you have your normal class leveling, and then you also have your ember leveling, and you'll pick abilities from each of these gods, and then they will level alongside you, and you'll get more powerful abilities as you go on. And what a lot of those abilities do is they use reactions and bonus actions. So that means on your turn, you'll always have a selection of things that you will have at your fingertips to do, and you'll never just be sitting there like, I attack, that's my turn, I'm going to wait 5 minutes now for my next turn to come along, which I think we can all empathize a lot with, especially at early level. I really wanted to give people something to do on their turn, even if it's just a small thing that they can do. That's the main area. It's sort of changed. Embers sort of have a very risk reward sort of play style.
Okay.
So you level them up, you can choose to sacrifice. You essentially burn your soul threads in a method called charring, and it decreases your maximum hit points and potentially hits you with other very nasty effects as well, like stat debuffs. But you greatly empower your ember abilities, and they become immensely powerful, but at the cost to your own vitality. So that's.
I'm curious about that. You just mentioned the ember abilities and sacrificing a bit of yourself to make yourself more powerful. What are the ember abilities and how do they work?
So the ember abilities are these. When I was talking earlier about the soul threads of these gods,
Right.
when you create your character, you choose up to 3 gods that you are sort of tied to in this way with your soul threads. You don't need to worship them in any way. It's just happenstance that you're tied to them. And they grant you these special abilities that allow you to mimic the gods and mimic some of their powers. And obviously, since they're formed of soul threads, these soul threads are quite aggressive. They're not your own, they're in your soul. So they will start to eat at your own soul threads, and that's where you can choose to burn your own to power these deific ones inside of you. So you're giving your own life to empower that of the god's abilities that live inside you. And yeah, I have seen a player die from charring. They have there are a lot of people in lore as well. They in this this spiral of trying to get more power, they just burn themselves and consume themselves through it. And it's very interesting to see how people approach it. Because some people are like, I just like the extra little spells and cantrips I can cast. And other people are like, no, I want to summon like tsunamis and blast you with tornadoes and everything, and I will do anything to have this power. It's fun to see people play with it.
I can imagine people playing one shots where they don't really care too much about how long the character lives, doing some crazy stuff. What was the weirdest thing that anyone's ever done in one of your games with that power?
Oh God. I'm trying to remember now because I've had a lot of playtests, so I'm trying to remember what's gone through. There was one person so there's an ability that allows you to summon essentially have swarms of, and this is a content warning for anybody listening, I'm going to be talking about insects and bugs for the next few minutes. Mm-hmm. So if you don't like that sort of thing, skip ahead a minute or so. But if there's one ember ability that allows you to have, it's called Swarm Host. It allows you to have insects that live sort of under your skin. And one player tied that with their Keystra ability, where when they kill things, they can grab its soul threads and then attach it to them, so then they can burn that and use it for other purposes. And it's just really cool to watch the combinations of stuff. So like they sent their insects out to devour this giant cockatrice that they were fighting, and the insects just basically devoured this thing and then flew back with the soul threads and then wove it back into sort of their skin. And it was like gnarly as hell. It was really cool, but also just like a bit, oh God, that's like terrifying.
Yeah.
That character terrifies me.
It sounds very terrifying, but I'm liking how flexible the system seems to be, because I don't imagine any standard 5e game or campaign setting would allow you to do that without the GM and the player having to put a huge amount of work into it. How was it the development of that change and to include that into the game?
So that specifically, I've been playtesting for about 8 years now. It's where the very start of the campaign started, before I even was like writing it for publication. It was just a little thing I gave my players, because all too often I also saw people saying, oh, I'd really love to have a bit of healing as a barbarian, but I don't want to multi-class. Like, it doesn't make sense for my character to multi-class into like cleric or druid or anything. And I was like, how do I fix that for you? Like, how do I make this fun for you to do what you want to do with your character? And that's partly where Embers also came from, was, you know, letting people have this extra layer of customization to do what they want to do with it. And seeing all the overlaps, because there are 20 gods that we have written with ember abilities, and each of them have, I think, 16 abilities you can choose from. So there's a huge mesh of overlap that you can just pick and choose. You can be like healing and insects and undeath and meld it all together and see what happens. And you can create this like wild character, and then you have your base class on top of that as well. We have one character who just pure assassin rogue and has doubled down on all the like stealth shadow assassination abilities. So you can really just push a character down one path, or you can like diversify, which is just great. There's lots of things that people come to me when they're making new characters, and they'll be like, "Oh, I'm gonna do this, this, and this." I'm like, I never even considered that, and that's really cool, and I just love that.
That's brilliant.
And we there are tables in the books showing sort of almost our design process and how we went through making them. So like I said, I want GMs to be able to take this as their own world, so it shows the GM, you know, if you want to get into that design brain and set that stuff for yourself, this is how we made them, this is how you can make your own and work with your players. If there's not something in the book that you want and the player has an idea or you've got an idea, here's how you balance it with the rest of the stuff that we've made.
Okay. A bit of an impossible question.
Mm-hmm.
What is your favorite aspect of Vynestra, of the game?
In terms of the whole Vynestra collection, the 1,000 books, it's got to be Deveros, because Deveros is very much the heart of where everything started to some degree, or where everything is eventually focused down on, and it's the city setting. It's the third book. Okay. Deveros, the Amethyst Crown. It's the capital of this Roman Republic / Empire type nation, and it's very much themed on ancient Rome of the late Republican era, but it's also themed on my personal favorite city, as I said earlier, Venice. And I didn't originally intend it to be like, this is just going to be Rome. I'm just going to write Rome. And then as I kept writing, I was like adding small bits of my experiences in Venice from there, and it just grew. And I was like, instead of trying to stop it, I just embraced it and was just like, right, this is now becoming a melding of Rome and Venice. And I know some people are going to not like that, but I personally love it. I think it brings a lot of flavor and variety and just sort of intrigue to this city. And yeah, it's by far the biggest book. It has 420 pages in. It has over 600, well, technically over 700 locations in it. They're all written. We have like hundreds of NPCs. Every single street and everything is hand drawn by Janice, one of our cartographers. So every single building is like hand drawn. And you can sort of point somewhere and be like, what's happening there? And there's probably a plot hook or an adventure or something that's going on in that city that you can just pick up and play.
How did you manage that? Because when I wrote Campo de Mitos, that's based in my hometown. I think I have about 30 locations, give or take, and even that was like, what can I say about this? I cannot have another butcher. What other thing can I add to this? How could you manage nearly 700 locations?
It was really interesting how it started. Originally, it was only about 200 locations. I say only, like that's still
I was
a lot.
Say, no, that would have been more than enough. Thank you very much. Come on.
But I was like, well, I very much built it off. We built the city from day one. So it's like, it was founded. Where did this start? What came up on the north side where they founded it here? Where did the districts grow? Who then lived in the south? Why did they live there? And we built the history over 1,000 years, essentially, figuring out why things exist, why they are in the places they are. And then I built almost sub-communities in each of the districts to support what it needed. And then it, like you said, there are multiple butchers in the city, but they all serve different purposes for the communities and the sub areas that they live in, and they all have their own side professions as well. There's one like butcher who's a taxidermist. There's another person who, because in the olden days, butchers used to be barbers, so they are sort of run a barber shop as well as part of that. And it was a lot of keeping track of things. When we started with we had the 200, and then it was kind of like, okay, I need to make more sense of this area, and it grew to a few more. And then Janice, cartographer, was like, you can have human locations in here. I was like, of course I can. Why not? The worst thing you can do to me is say, you could add some more stuff there. I'm like, okay. And then my brain will just focus on it. And then suddenly 3 days later, there's another like 30 locations that have been written and sort of threaded into the lore.
That is incredible. No wonder you're getting under the 1,000 pages. So what is in the other books? I mean, we've got the characters, I presume. We've got the rules. I can imagine magic, the city. What else is in there?
So the first book is very much the world as a whole. So the universe, it's got the ember system, it's got the gods, and like very high level stuff like diseases and feats that you can get and additional stuff. And the way we like to describe it is you sort of have the universe, and the second book focuses down onto the Aldaran Empire. So it's primarily a lore book with a few of the subclasses and backgrounds that are thematic to that. And the Aldaran Empire very much focuses on the Aldarans, who are the equivalent of the fantasy Romans. So it goes into a lot of like depth, like almost too much in some degree, because I know some people really like that, of like how they live, what their like clothing's like, what their food and drink is like, their festivals, like hand gestures they use, and like all the different intonations of speech and sort of vocabulary that they use. It really goes in depth on their entire culture and their empire. Then we have the city setting, and then that kind of focusing on their capital. And focusing even more, we have the Creatures of Deveros, which is written not by me, it is written by the demigod of adventure in the world, who has usurped me from the author title on the page. And it's about his little adventures in Deveros and all the interesting creatures that he's documented there. It also has a lot on demigods, who are obviously your characters are becoming demigods, but they're going to be NPC demigods as well that they might be fighting against, who are these all-powerful entities that to take them down, you have to sort of research them and discover what their ritual is to weaken them. So you have to perform these very complex rituals to sort of weaken them. So that's all in sort of the fourth book. And then the fifth book is our adventure setting, is our adventure path, which focuses on the vampiric order and how the vampires have their grubby little fingers in all the political pies of the city. And the players get wrapped up in this bigger than life kind of plot that they didn't intend to in the first place, and get sort of vampires throwing them into the arenas to fight.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the production of the book, because I have been what I have seen of it. I think my only criticism would be that the paragraphs are too close, but I'm always complaining about that because being dyslexic, having the paragraphs too close to each other, it means that the whole page can look like a wall of text, even if it isn't. But apart from that,
I'll keep that in mind when we're writing future books, because I didn't know that was a thing.
please.
So thank you for that. I'm always looking to make our books more accessible. So if we can do that, I'll keep that in mind.
Thank you. That's quite all right. But they look absolutely gorgeous, man. I mean, they really look very, very nice. How long has the design of this book been coming? Because they are quite well looked after.
It's been 4 years. So I started off with working with one artist, Danny, and then I decided, I think about a year in, I'm going to publish this. I'm going to make this an actual sort of like publication I'm going to take to Kickstarter. That's when a lot of savings then came out and started going into funding everything. So I'm very much of the mindset of, I don't want to make promises that I cannot fulfill.
Okay.
And I always want the highest possible quality that I can give people, whether it be writing, art, like production value of the books and the print. So I wanted to have sort of the books here in front of me, ready to go before I even asked anyone to give me any money for them. So I've got some like test prints done, and it was all very much from that mindset of, I want to bring this to Kickstarter as a finished product, and Kickstarter is there to fund the print run of this thing that I've been making, rather than making this promise and then not knowing if I can deliver on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much done. Did you have any experience with design or publishing before, or have you been learning as you went along?
All learning as I've gone along. What's really helped is going to conventions and meeting other people. I've met some incredible people at UK Games Expo and Dragon Meet, and I'm surrounded by a wealth of experience, and I'm very lucky to have made all the connections I've made and spoken to all these people. It's like if I have a question about logistics or anything like that, I message Paul at GamesQuest. I'm like, Paul, how does logistics work? How do we get booked from A to Z? And he'll explain it for me. He's helped me so much. And then I've got All About Games Consulting who are there, Evangelos and Tim, obviously, you know, Evangelos, and sort of being like, how does Kickstarter work? How do we do back kit? And then they've really helped me take it to the crowdfunding platform. So I myself am a first-time publisher, but there are so many experienced people around me that are just helping bring this to life, and I'm eternally thankful for everything they have done.
That, to be honest, that shows very much, because the fact that you've managed to get your book pretty much finished before even the Kickstarter begins, that is quite something. But that begs the question, why are you going to Kickstarter if everything is finished? Why don't you just release it as a POD and be done with it?
I think it's partly with the way that Kickstarters work, they generate a lot of publicity. So if I just dumped it onto Tabletop RPG and itch.io, maybe 6 people would see it, and then it would sort of float off into the distance. But with Kickstarter, you know, you have BackKit who can run ads for you. You have this whole big thing you can build up to and then announce it, and then that can help publicize it. So I think part of what Kickstarter ultimately is, and other crowding sort of sites as well, other crowding sites do exist. They generate a bit of like interest around it, and it creates this like centralized time zone of like 30 days or 23 days where people can be talking about your product, and then you can talk to them about it, and it's almost like a news platform for your thing that you've made. It's like setting you up to like speak to people about it, like we're doing today.
Yeah, no, that's indeed it's a very good point, because Kickstarter is not just a crowdfunding platform; it is also a marketing platform, it's an advertising platform. So I think that makes perfect sense to me. What is the funding goal going to be?
So the funding goal is 7,500, which we hit in 44 minutes, which was bonkers. We were all sitting there in a call and just watching it, and it was just like, oh my god, this is just like swept it away. But that is like the minimum goal for us to do a print run. It's not the goal for us to make back money on stuff spent. That is a bit higher, which is a secret goal that I'm not telling people, because I don't want people to know whether we have like made back our money or not, essentially.
Well, but you know what? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it is perfectly and quite commendable. You know, if you told people, you know, I've spent 15,000 on this, spent 20,000 on this, because you're basically telling people this is how much I believed in my own project. And the fact that you're not asking for it back right away, because it could be quite easy to say, okay, the print run is £5,000, but to get all this money back is going to be another 30. So I'm going to ask for 35,000 to make sure that I get everything back. You're not doing that. You just want to get a book out there, and if you get your money, then you'll be lucky. But if you don't, suck it up, buttercup.
Yeah,
basically.
Exactly. It's you know, it's a passion project at the end of the day. It's something that I poured my heart and soul into over the past several years, and I just want people to enjoy it. And I know we've had a lot of people, like very kind messages from people saying like, I've been looking forward to this project for like months, some people even years, because we started advertising a while ago. And yeah, it's really nice to see those people sort of still to this day like leaving messages saying, yes, we're really excited for this and really want to see it. And just that small contingent of people keeps me like really happy and like just wanting to keep doing this.
Good, and I hope it really continues. What are the pledge levels for this project? How much do people have to pay to get their hands on this?
So you can get any one of the PDFs for £12.
Very reasonable.
Yeah, it's. I did a bit of research before, and it felt like the right sort of amount. You can get all of the PDFs for £60, and then I know that some people don't care so much necessarily about like the adventures that we've written. I don't like running adventures from books. I like writing my own. So we've done the first 3 books, which are all the stuff you need to run the world essentially, plus all 5 PDFs for 130. And then if you want all 5 books in physical plus all 5 in digital, that's £200 for the 5.
Okay.
3 of the books are 40. The Devros book is 50, and then the adventure book is 30 because it's a bit shorter than the rest.
And a question for you. If people bought the adventure book, would they be able to use it with another 5e game? Would it be that compatible?
They could use it without using any of our like Ember system or anything like that. It's just like very much designed in that you can just run it using our Embers or not using our Embers. And there are some encounters that are balanced with both. So you have enemies sat box with both sort of types. It is very much based around Deveros, the city. It's set in one of the districts. If anyone wants to like have a flavor of it, there is the 100-page preview that we've got that's entirely free. It's got an entire load of lore. It's got the district that the adventures run in, and then the first adventure of that adventure path. That could be run as its own standalone, but I think the adventure book in itself probably needs at least the Deveros book to run, and maybe the monster manual. I wouldn't recommend anyone just buys it and expects to be able to run it without a bit of context around it.
Okay, that's fair enough indeed. When are you planning to have the production finished and the books being sent out to backers?
So after the Kickstarter ends, which is midway through October, we've got some final edits to make. The last 2 books, so the Monster Manual and the Adventure book, still having final bits done to them. They're expected to be done 2 to 3 weeks after the Kickstarter ends, and then we've got a beta period essentially where we're sending out digital copies to all of the backers, and then they have a month to sort of look through everything if they want, and to there'll be a form where people can sort of reply and give feedback and anything that they need to say about the books. I've seen a couple of other Kickstarters do it, and I really like the idea of just, we are only humans and we only have a set number of people on our team, so having backers who are interested in the project look over it, and if they just happen to spot anything, just tell us. Like, I think that's a really good idea. So we're doing that for a month, and then I think early December is when the digital copies finals will be sent out. Give or take a few weeks depending on how long edits take, and then early next year, so January through to about April, is when physical distribution will happen. So we'll be placing the print order around December, January time, and then physical distribution will happen and logistics will happen, and hoping that they'll be with people by March, April time next year.
Okay, that's a very, very reasonable turnaround time, really. That's pretty excellent. And then what's going to happen to Vynestra after that?
And then what? I honestly have a document full of about 20 different things I want to do, and have no idea which of them to do next. And I have been told by my partner I am not allowed to work on anything for a few months at least, because this is, would you believe it, my part-time job, or what I do in my free time. I think with maybe a lot of people in the tabletop industry, this is their side thing. I have my full-time job that I work as well, so it's been a lot doing this over the past 4 years, and I think I need a bit of a break. But one thing I think I'm excited to do is just to make a few more embers. There are a lot of gods in the book that didn't get any embers tied to them or any abilities, and I've got ideas for a lot of them, so I kind of want to do a little supplement for that. But someone might beat me to the punch, because the ember system is going to the OGL, and I very deliberately put it in the OGL, so anyone, if Vynestra is loved by some people and they really want to go and make their own supplements and create their own stuff for it, I wanted people to be able to do that as well.
That's amazing.
So who knows? There might be more Ember stuff before I even get the chance to write it.
That'd be cool. that would be really, really cool, because that's the true sign that something that you have created really resonates with someone else when they take it and they do their own thing, which is amazing. Great. Have we left anything? Is there anything at all that I haven't mentioned that you think people need to know this?
I don't think so.
Okay.
If you are interested in it, you can head over to the Kickstarter page, and I highly recommend watching the video, if just to listen to the really cool song that our friend Silgor made, because it is such a catchy song, and it will be stuck in your head for weeks. And I apologize in advance if you do listen to it, because it will be going around in there for a while.
Okay, good. I look forward to listening to that one now. Giles, thank you very, very much indeed for being with me tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure. I really hope that Vynestra really exceeds every single expectation. And why not that you get your money back and then some? Because people who invest in their passions that much, I think they do deserve to see that recognized and get to make a living out of it. So I hope that we can have another conversation in the future. Would you tell me, Paco? Yep, I actually work at home now doing this forever. I think that would be amazing.
That would be the dream. In 2 years' time, we're like, you know what? We've made another book, and this is all about those cultures that I didn't get to cover in the first one.
Yes, and we will definitely talk about those.
Definitely.
So that's it. Done. I hope that you will take a look at Vynestra. I think it's going to be very well worth it. I get the feeling that it's been done with a great deal of care, which is always very nice, but also having, influences from ancient Europe. As an European, I like the idea, I like the idea of finding out what the Gauls were doing at the time, or the Romans, what did they find? Who did they find? How would that be translated into a D&D sort of 5e system? I'm curious. I'm genuinely curious about it, and I hope that you will be too. And you will let me know what you think once this is out, which would be absolutely brilliant. But in the meantime, thank you so much for being with me today. It's been absolutely great, and I hope that I will talk to you very, very soon. Take care.